Oh, it's brilliant, Will. It's wrestling shirts, it's fans, it's a great environment to be in. There's a great feel-good factor about New York. I always call it the greatest city on earth because I have more fun here than any other city in the world. And it's a city where things happen but could never happen anywhere else. Like one minute you're having lunch and are having a hot dog on the Intrepid, which was fighting the Nazis and fighting the Vietnam War, and the next minute you're bumping into Terry Runnels in a lift. I mean, that could only happen in New York City. It's the greatest city on earth. I've had such a fun week. I'm here. I'm doing a little bit of work, but if the visa authorities are listening, I'm doing no work and trying to enjoy the wrestling as much as possible. And I've got a decent mix between touristy stuff and wrestling. We've gone to Times Square. I'm here with my brother Ben. He's doing most of the heavy lifting camera duties. I spoke to the Revival yesterday, and after the interview, I said, Ben, how's the camera work? Because he doesn't really operate a camera very often, in fact, never. And Dash Wilder said, Benji, you're doing a great job on the camera. The Revival were pretty fun. So it's been a really good week. I've mixed it with the touristy stuff and the wrestling. I've been to 2 wrestling shows so far. The TakeOver on Friday night, and I went to the big WrestleCon show as well on Thursday, which was brilliant.
And I guess understandably, some of the companies who aren't WWE, they make hay this weekend as well, and they're all in and around New York. They're having shows this weekend as well. It's not just WWE who gets a lot out of their WrestleMania weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, WrestleCon is the big one. Like, they have a better lineup than Access. They also charge bigger prices than Access. If you want a picture with Ric Flair, you're going to pay $20. If you want him to sign something, you're going to pay $20 at least. I mean, some of them are upwards of $40 for a picture and $40 for an autograph. So you're talking the $70 combo if you want both. So you can lose a lot of money this week if you want to live out your childhood dreams. But at the same time, it's such a unique experience. It's the only chance you'll probably ever get to do it. So if you're a wrestling fan, if you grew up watching these people, if they're a part of your childhood and your adolescence, you can justify the spend because, I mean, it is the price of maybe a shirt. It is the price of a hoodie, the couple of weeks of coffee, couple of days coffee. So a lot of people will justify it. But a lot of wrestling companies do make money. And you can see by the lineups on a lot of the cards, like it wouldn't be cheap to book Bandito. It wouldn't be cheap to book X-Pac, Hurricane Helms. We also saw Will Ospreay headline that WrestleCon show on the Thursday night and just absolutely kill it. I mean, there's a lot of talk about WWE guys because they have such a punishing schedule, maybe go easy sometimes. Ospreay obviously has MSG on Saturday night, so you would think that on the Thursday night he would go relatively safe, not to jeopardize the fact that he'll be involved in MSG, and he absolutely kills it. He destroys it.
Ric Flair, you mentioned, obviously spoke this week as well at WrestleCon. He's previously headlined WrestleMania with Macho Man Randy Savage, but it falls to his daughter now this weekend, along with Ronda Rousey, the former big star in the UFC, probably the first women's breakthrough star in that company, and Ireland's Becky Lynch to actually headline things that coming up tonight.
Yeah, it's class. And the Becky thing is, it's such a big story here. Like, it's massive. And I can't believe it hasn't translated in any meaningful way in Ireland. I don't know if it's changed over the last few days since I left. I wouldn't imagine so.
There was one article in the Irish Times on Saturday.
One article, yeah. Stephen Merchant did a great article. He directed Fighting With My Family, the Page film, and he had no interest in wrestling. Really, like, none at all. But The Rock approached him and asked him to screenwrite a movie. You're probably going to do it because it's The Rock. And he said the point is that these people were doing what they were doing in any other industry. If they were doing it in the entertainment industry, if they're doing it on film, if they're doing it in music, if they were growing to cultural icon status in any other facet of life, the interest in them would be huge. The attraction of them would be huge. But because it's wrestling, it's still kind of seen in mainstream circles as a bit carny. In European and UK and Irish mainstream circles. In America, the mainstream completely buy into it. Like, it's big news on NBC. It's big news on even CNN. They will cover it. They will give it the attention that it warrants, because when 80,000 people go to a stadium, you better get tuned in to what those 80,000 people are doing. It's the second biggest channel on YouTube, the WWE. The audience is massive. So the fact that it's not understood or accepted in mainstream circles in the UK, in Ireland, and large parts of Europe, it remains a huge mystery to me.
Becky Lynch was saying in that interview in the Times, she's just kind of enjoying the ride at the moment. She's not thinking maybe about the significance about being a headliner at WrestleMania. But in terms of this significance, we spoke about this on the podcast a few weeks ago as well. For 3 women to actually be in the main event, that's a remarkable sea change compared to where wrestling was 10 years ago.
Yeah, when I started watching wrestling, it was Sable and it was Sunny, and they were there to keep older boys than me interested in wrestling. Like, that was what they were there for. I was probably there for the pageantry and the superhero characters, but they were there to arouse and entice the 16, 17-year-old lads who are probably thinking, this is a bit silly for me, and I'm not really interested anymore. That was the point of them. They were objects of desire. They weren't to be treated seriously because that was the role they were given by the bookers at the time and by the company at the time. It's changed immeasurably now, because I don't know if women could wrestle in 1998 or 1997. I don't know if there was a huge amount of talent there that could work great matches, because they never got the chance to do it. They were always kind of pigeonholed into being the objects of desire. The sea change happened. I think Stephanie McMahon deserves an awful lot of credit in this, because her dad has run the show with an iron grip and a vice-like grip for so long. But when she became an executive member and someone who could steer the future of the business and the future of that company, that seemed to have changed the way that they took corporate social responsibility and what they do with charity, and in the way that they approach women's wrestling. I think she's been hugely influential in spearheading it. And an Irishman too, Dave Finlay, Fit Finlay. He was one of the first women's directors. He ran the women's division in the kind of early to mid parts of the noughties, when it started to be taken more seriously and training them started to become more important, and getting them involved in meaningful matches and programs started to become more important. So they deserve huge credit. And I think to get to a point where it is the main event of WrestleMania, I don't think it'll really hit me until I'm sitting there and it's the last bout and the music hits. I'm kind of like, okay, this is it. It's really happening. There are three gifted, extraordinary, talented athletes. And that's what it should be about, not that they're women. It is obviously the big story because it's the first time it happens. Cheap plug, I spoke to Roman Reigns yesterday. The interview will be coming across the social media channels later. Keep an eye out for it. But we asked him about Becky Lynch. Naturally, we're really proud of her, what she's done in Ireland. And he said, and I thought he summed it up quite eloquently, it transcends the business of WWE. It's for any woman doing anything, really. Whether it's business where you want to be a CEO, where you want to be the head of marketing, you want to be the head of finance, and maybe those paths have traditionally been walked by men. It's you can do it. You can have the biggest job. You can have the biggest spotlight because we're doing it. So why can't you? And I think it's a message worth noting. Ric Flair, we've kind of joked in the past about that he can get emotional buttering a slice of bread. That's just the kind of guy Ric Flair is. But he came out at WrestleCon on Thursday night and he gave a beautiful speech where he said, you know what, I think I've achieved a lot in this business, but nothing compares to what my daughter Charlotte and Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey will do on Sunday, because no one else has done that before. This is the biggest main event of WrestleMania history. And he was sincere as Ric Flair can be. He said, this is bigger than Hulk Andre. This is bigger than anything that came before it, because it is three women who have not only been given this shot because it's the right thing to do in 2019 to promote equality, they have earned it. They're not being given it, they've earned it. And I thought that is probably the most fitting message. There's like zero tokenism. This is all earned. They're not main eventing because they're trying to push a women's revolution. They're not main eventing because they feel like promoting equality is the thing that they should be doing in 2019. They're main eventing because they're the three most deserving of a main event spot. It's the most interesting match. It's the most interesting program. And that is why they're main eventing.
And Rebecca Quinn, or Becky Lynch to use her stage name, has stolen the attention at so many key moments in the last 6 months. Coming off the Evolution pay-per-view, at the end of Survivor Series, they started this program building towards her against Ronda Rousey. There was more of a reaction about her winning the Women's Royal Rumble than there was about Seth Rollins winning the Men's Royal Rumble. And then we've had this big program between the three with all its twists and turns over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Becky Lynch has just stolen the attention and in many ways I think become the biggest star in the company.
Without doubt. And you can see that here when you get here. You know Becky Lynch is the big star. You walk around as a takeover on Friday night and all the t-shirts were the man. Like, the amount of people who are for Becky Lynch and getting involved in what she's doing is insane. She is the biggest star in the business. She's the biggest star in the company. I'm not quite sure how they got lightning in a bottle. Like, it nearly happened by accident with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And a lot of people who would know much more than I believe that this is as close they've come to replicating the Stone Cold phenomenon and the Rock phenomenon since then. They would have loved to do it with Roman Reigns. They'd probably like to do it with Seth Rollins. And without doubt, they planned to do it with Ronda Rousey. Becky is in the spot that they wanted of Ronda Rousey, but she got there because she's more interesting. She's maybe arguably better in the ring. She's better in the ring than Ronda Rousey. I'm not sure about Charlotte. Charlotte's a really, really gifted athlete as well. Very, very solid in the ring, really good worker. But she's got it through sheer force of will and a little bit of faith from the booking committee behind her. Like, it's hard to believe that less than 18 months ago we were talking about Becky Lynch's TV time being down, her promo time being non-existent, because they claimed the fans couldn't understand her. Her accent was too harsh. And now look at her. It's kind of hard to see how it happened. I think a lot of it is it's more accident than design, and that accident comes from Rebecca Quinn trying things. I think she had a plan to get to where she is. I don't think, like, she'd be lying if she said she honestly thought that she would be this big. She would transcend the sport in the way that she has.
Ronda Rousey, what have you made of the kind of 13, 14 months she's been in WWE? Because the expectation is at the end of this, she, at least for a short time, goes away and maybe comes back in the future. What have you made of her time in WWE?
I think they waited a bit too long to bring in the kind of pissed off Kurt Angle, chip on my shoulder, I'm a real athlete, what am I doing with you guys in fake make-believe land. I thought that would have been a good way to approach it. They tried to make her a face because they thought that would be the way to go, but it's never going to be the way to go. You're always going to appreciate the people who have busted their gut for longer in the pursuit of your entertainment than you are someone who just waltzes in on a huge contract and goes straight into the main event. So I'm not really sure how they thought they could make Ronda Rousey be a huge babyface star of the company, because I don't think it was ever going to happen. I think wrestling fans were always going to reject her in the way that they reject Brock Lesnar, in the way that they could have rejected The Rock when he came back from Hollywood. They don't like part-timers. They don't appreciate people who have no interest in being there and entertaining them week in, week out. They kind of resent them. So she's been good. She's taken to the wrestling really, really well. Her character development has been much slower than I would have anticipated. It's only in the last 4 weeks where I've really been like, geez, Ronda can go. And that video where she's getting her hair done and just absolutely burying the business, that's the most interesting thing she's actually done. And the funny thing is, she didn't even do it on TV. I'm sure most of it was approved, but I would wonder how much was led by WWE Creative, which at times, let's face it, falls down a well.
I think that brawl last Monday just gone kind of excited a lot of people as well. It had a kind of an attitude era kind of feel about it as well. Slight craziness. Both Charlotte and Ronda ending up getting arrested at the end of it. The fact that the back of a police car gets kicked out by Ronda Rousey in the middle of it as well. That kind of madness seems to have got people excited again about this main event, because it's been a really long build. This has been set up quite a few weeks now. Yeah,
it's the going home show has been for the last 4 weeks. It's been hard. Like it's gone on a long time. I mean, really, it's gone on since last November, since Becky was pulled from Survivor Series. And that is a very, very long time to build a program. So, in fairness, they have kept it somewhat interesting, except for the beat the clock stuff. The less said about that, the better, because it was just so unnecessarily pointless. But yeah, last week really felt like it brought it up another level. For me, one of the most interesting parts was definitely Ronda's promo. And Becky on social media is almost as good as Becky on the mic, because she's just so smart and so crafty at making you still care about something that you could probably have lost interest in by now. They are blessed in some ways by the fact that no one really cares about Rollins and Brock. It's not a match that anyone I've spoken to all week has mentioned. In fact, I didn't even realize it was on until I got to Friday and I'm sitting at TakeOver and an advert appears on the screen. I'm like, oh, that's what the main event could have been. And it's weird to think that Rollins won the Royal Rumble and there's just been very little interest in him or what he's doing. And even Roman Reigns this week, there hasn't been he said himself, like, my schedule is much lighter than it's ever been because I am not the draw this week. People are not here to see me. TV stations are not here to talk to me. It's the girls. I always want to go on last, of course, but it's nice to not be in the spotlight in the same way that I have been for the last 4 WrestleManias. So it's such a huge moment, and I think they have played it very, very well in the last couple of weeks. They probably have drawn it out just a little bit too much, but they have built it pretty well. And the final showdown where they beat the holy hell out of each other, and that knee from Charlotte to Ronda just looked like it could have been a knockout blow. I think it's a weird, wrestling is odd in that we know it's a work, and we accept that, and we suspend our disbelief to try and enjoy the show. And that's the whole point of it. If you were picking holes in every botch and saying, that punch didn't hurt, that kick didn't land, I mean, go home. You're wasting your time. Go watch UFC. But it's odd in the same way that wrestling fans don't understand what a work is, but at the same time, they love when the line between work and shoot is blurred, when they're not really sure if what they're seeing is real or not. That's like the most fun, where you're like, ooh, well, was that legit? I like that part. So there's a lot in this feud, and more in, I think, any other feud on the card at the moment, where you're left wondering, is Ronda really disenfranchised and pissed off? Could she leave because they haven't made her into the star they promised her? Is Charlotte really just an entitled witch who gets everything on her surname? Does Becky really feel this way about the business? I think that because there's truth in what she's saying, maybe she does. I think that because there's truth in Ronda Rousey not being happy with the fact that she hasn't become the star that she probably signed up to become, might have made her a little bit pissed off, might have made her do that hair-fixing promo where she completely destroys everything and smashes the kayfabe wall.
It's interesting as well, what I like about this one compared to some of the rest of the card seems very predictable in terms of how some of it has been booked. I have no idea really how this main event goes, because there's maybe 3, possibly even more than 3 possible endings to this. You could have a situation where Ronda Rousey wins, keeps the belts, the chase goes on for a bit further. They could give the crowds the finish they want, which is Becky Lynch picking up both belts at the end of the night. They could have Charlotte Flair retain and then Becky Lynch have to chase after her. There's just so much that could potentially happen, and this seems a very difficult, despite being predetermined drama, to actually know what's going to happen in this match later.
Yeah, the WWE don't have the greatest track record of giving us the right Mania endings. I think back to that awful Booker T Triple H feud where Triple H was just the worst heel ever, and some of the stuff bordered on really
verging
uncomfortable.
on racism too, I think.
Yeah. I didn't want to say it, but yeah, that's what it was. Like, there were people like you don't deserve to be champions, and you're like, yeah, look, we get you got to get heel heat, but maybe, you know,
it's a problem
at the
when
end,
you haven't had too many black champions.
Yeah, it's a big problem when you haven't had too many black champions. This ageable black guy, people like you don't get to be champions, and he was just horrible for that entire feud. And he crossed the line between being a good heel and being a complete asshole, I think. And that would have been fine. You would have accepted that as a necessary evil if Booker would have had his moment where he stands in the ring and he lifts up the belt and he's the champion, and the bad guy, the horrible guy, gets vanquished and the good guy has its day. But they gave Triple H the belt, and they gave him it clean 1, 2, 3 in the ring, and it was just so unsatisfying as an end, because you wanted Triple H to get his dues. You wanted him to take that loss, and you wanted Booker to have that moment, but they didn't do it. So do I trust WWE to give me the ending that I want and that the fans deserve? Absolutely not. How could you trust them? They have an awful habit of ruining main events for the shock factor, like Reigns and Lesnar. You know, everyone's like, yeah, Roman's going to get the belt and Roman's going to be the guy. And
apparently changed on the morning of WrestleMania last year.
The torch is being passed. And, you know, I'm like, look, I'm ready for that. I think, you know, the guy is, again, people will have respect for him because he shows up every day. And he does try his best. I don't think I've ever seen Roman Reigns phone in a match. Even I've seen him in 1 or 2 house shows. And he goes through the motions, but he still goes through them. But then they gave us Lesnar winning, and everyone was just so pissed off. I think they get a perverse pleasure in alienating their fan base every week.
Speaking of Triple H, obviously an interesting final match, if it is to be his retirement match tonight, against Dave Batista. I think it's an interesting one because Batista's obviously picked up a lot of mainstream attention because of Guardians of the Galaxy, the fact the Avengers movie is coming out in a few weeks' time as well. That's appeal, that's eyeballs on the product. But is a defeat to Dave Batista, is that the right way for Triple H to finish his storied career?
No, Batista's had a handful of good matches in his career, but they've always been against guys who can carry okay wrestlers. Like, Batista is probably harsh to call him a bit of a Tom McGee. That tape's resurfaced this week, so there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk about Tom McGee and Bret Hart.
Could Bret Hart have got a match out of Batista?
Yes, he could have. And Triple H could get a match out of Batista, and Undertaker could get a match out of Batista, and John Cena could get a match out of Batista. But the point is, I'd rather 2 greats in the ring going at it. Like, I would have loved a HBK Triple H showdown one last time. Let's see who the best man is. I could have bought into that. That would have made sense. We're friends. We're fighting. We love each other, but we have to prove who the better guy is as we're both about to exit the business. That would have been perfect. Like, HBK is only out until a truckload of money turns up outside his gaff in Texas and he's back in again. Like, they got him back for that Saudi show, so they could have got him for WrestleMania, I'm sure, if they tried hard enough. Like, he works for the company, give him enough money to do it, put the pressure on to do it, and you've got a feud people can buy into. Triple H and Batista is not something I'm usually excited about. Like, I Triple H's career has been unbelievable. He's going into the Hall of Fame this week, and he deserves it. And I think his impact on the business outside the ring is just as positive. Like when you see what NXT has become, when you see what he's done in developing talent and making interesting characters, more interesting characters than have probably been in the business in the 5 to 10 years that came before he started NXT. He deserves something better. He deserves something that will invest people in a different way. They even had to go to desperate measures to try and invest people by getting Ric Flair, who's 194 years old, to take a bit of a behind closed doors beating and then be dragged across the parking lot. I know that's a sign of desperation.
He talked about as well, which was kind of weird.
Yeah, I always get really uncomfortable when dead people are brought into it, and even when Becky had brought in Roddy Piper, obviously Ronda has wrapped herself under his gimmick in a lot of ways and his look because she was his favorite wrestler or whatever. But I always get a bit uncomfortable when dead people are used in that way because I get that you have to sell storylines, but can we just have some line of decency where it doesn't feel like you're dragging someone who's not here in for promotional purposes? And when Flair's son is brought into it, it doesn't sit well at all.
That might be the best match, Batista against Triple H. I presume it's going to be a lot of kind of, walk and brawl, and for the bits that are in the ring, we're likely to probably see rest holds, and then weapons are going to get used at a certain point in the match as well.
Which I'm fine because they can't go 25, 30 minutes and put on a wrestling clinic. I think it's probably beyond Batista, and I think at this stage of Triple H's career, he hasn't wrestled since tearing his pec, has he? This would be his first time back in the ring.
Melbourne, I think.
Yeah, and went surgery straight afterwards. So I don't know what shape he's coming in. He keeps himself in good shape, and I'm sure he wouldn't come into WrestleMania in bad shape. But at the same time, he's not coming into WrestleMania to wrestle a match. He's coming into WrestleMania to do a brawl and say goodbye and probably go out on his back and get a good ovation.
I've watched Kurt Angle.
But again, why is he going out? Why is Triple H jobbing to Batista on his final WrestleMania appearance? That would make no sense for me. If he jobs to Shawn Michaels, you could say, well, there we go. HBK was the better of the two. That's it, settled. But him losing to Batista is pointless. Why not put him up against a young up-and-comer you want to get over and do the Undertaker Reigns thing or the Undertaker Lesnar thing and try and do it that way?
Well, I was kind of thinking last week as well when we were chatting about this. I'm really, really unhappy with Kurt Angle's last opponent being Baron Corbin. That just feels wrong. Kurt's had a lot of the matches I would have liked to have seen over the last 2 weeks and is kind of going away, multiple appearances across Raw and SmackDown. It's been the going away tour in many ways. I would have actually been okay with the idea of a short match between Triple H and Kurt Angle. Two guys who were genuine rivals back in the Attitude Era. You let Kurt Angle go over and you retire both guys.
I would have loved it. Well, that was the booking. I talked about this on the podcast with you, Richie and Niall, a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, one of the most interesting angles, and not for any reason, not for anything serious, just because it was funny, was Angle fancying Stephanie in the year 2000 and being a bit of a greaser and Triple H catching him and being like, Kurt, why are you this creepy weirdo who keeps hanging around my girlfriend? And be like, oh, we're just friends. He gets friend zoned by Stephanie and pursues it so hard. It's just creepy. I loved that angle. I thought it was so much fun. Why not throw back to it and just do it in 2019 to a point where Triple H is like, Kurt, we've been through this. Stay away from Stephanie. And get him into a match and put him in the ring. Maybe Triple H thinks that he can carry Batista, but he probably doesn't think he could carry Angle. I think it's going to be tough on Kurt. I don't think he's able to go the way he's gone over the last few weeks. His timing is off. I hate to say it because I love Angle. He's one of my favorites, and his achievements have been extraordinary. But his timing is off. He's looked ropey. He's looked prone to mistakes that weren't there for much of the last 10, 15 years. And I think he's probably 1 year past his sell-by date, which is hard. And the thing that worries me a little bit is that, these guys are always chasing the dragon. And if they don't get a fulfilling end or a fitting end, which, let's face it, if it's Baron Corbin, it's not going to be a fitting end. Angle might decide when his contract expires, why don't I just go to the Indies or AEW, have one more great match, go against Cody Rhodes, go against someone who will get me a lot of attention and will give me the ending I deserve. Angle could probably do a retirement tour outside WWE and make a lot of money and be the headline. I don't think he hasn't main evented those Raws where he's gone away, has he?
No, and he's gone up against a lot of guys who would have been interesting stories. AJ Styles, who he would have taken on TNA, Samoa Joe as well. It was just kind of weird because obviously WWE have access to the tapes from TNA now because of the deal they made with Jeff Jarrett last year. Yeah. I would have liked to have seen maybe him going out, if not with Triple H, against Samoa Joe or against AJ Styles, use that footage, particularly had it been Samoa Joe. They had a great rivalry in TNA. Use that, build it up, and have it as a grudge match to finish. To me, whether he wins or loses against Baron Corbin, it's going to be forgettable.
Like, yeah, I just can't accept that that's the way that I think is the right way to send Kurt Angle out. Like, it's like they have nothing for him and they have nothing for Corbin, so they just throw them together. And it just makes absolutely no sense. Like, I can't understand it. Like, I get that they tried to build it by having Corbin be this authority figure because they didn't know what to do with him in the ring. But it's so senseless and useless. And if that is the end to Kurt Angle, if that's how they end it, I'd be so pissed off. Like, it'll be so unfulfilling.
Well, look, we've got another 6 hours or so of matches outside of those. As you mentioned, Seth Rollins, Brock. Nobody cares about this. And I feel for Seth Rollins because he's had to dance on his own nearly in all the build to this. You've got Paul Heyman advocating for Brock, and that's fine. But you've had so little screen time with those two guys together. You don't get the feeling that Seth was really chasing anything after the Royal Rumble as well. And as a result, this match is totally forgettable.
Like, I really want to know, is Brock a draw? Like, we're told that we're lumbered with Lesnar because Lesnar puts buttons on seats. But I'd love to know the difference between the gate on a night where Lesnar's not headlining and the gate on a night where he is headlining. Because if you talk to fans or if you read what they say on the internet, they don't care about Brock. They don't want Brock. They have no interest in Brock. They wish he would go away because all he does is cut the legs off someone else. All he's doing is backing up the heavyweight division or just getting in the way. And again, I think wrestling fans respect a champion that they see, that is visible, that they can go to shows. Like, if this business is built so much on merch and on who is popular and who is over, I don't understand Lesnar's spot on the card. Like, at all. How is he so high on the card? Because you would imagine that he's not selling seats and he's not selling shirts and fans don't want to see him. So how is he being a main eventer for the last 3 years? I don't get it.
That was clear at the Royal Rumble this year, Darren, because they were trying to sell initially Braun Strowman against Brock Lesnar. That wasn't selling, and they had to substitute in Finn Balor, a more popular star than Braun Strowman. I would have looked not Braun Strowman being the guy that you're actually selling tickets to. I would have worried about the fact that Brock isn't shifting tickets.
I'm going to apologise, Will, because I'm not sure if you can hear my phone beeping. So if you can hear it vibrating, my apologies. But Finn Lynch has done something in the water. Email problems there. Sorry, go again.
No, in terms of just Brock Lesnar, you were talking about like putting bums on seats. They had problems at the Royal Rumble this year. They announced it was going to be Braun Strowman against Brock Lesnar. They had to put Finn Balor in, a more popular superstar than Strowman, to try and sell the tickets. They didn't sell all that well. To me, the issue isn't Balor or Strowman. I think the issue is that people didn't want to go and see Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, like, you know what you're going to get with a Brock match. Although, I have to admit, some of them have surprised me. His match against Balor was actually pretty enjoyable. And for a second there, you actually believe that, my God, what if Balor is able to do it? I thought his match against Reigns last year at the Rumble was decent. And I thought his match as well at the Greatest Royal Rumble. That was the cage match with Reigns. I enjoyed that. So Lesnar is capable of putting on a decent match. But at the same time, I've seen Brock Lesnar. I like what he's done. I respect his achievements, but move over. Like, let someone else be the draw. And Reigns and Rollins will never be the guys that you allow to carry the company as long as you keep bottling it and going back to Brock to bail you out. Brock, please be our headliner. Like, he has nothing but contempt for the company. Nothing but contempt for the entire business. He's there to make money. And the worst thing is, he doesn't even bother to pretend that he has any interest in the business. Like, I don't know if you saw that documentary where he comes in after I think it was the 24, the 24 after the WrestleMania, and he just flings the belt at Vince.
Yeah. Vince is ready to square off with him.
He has nothing but absolute hate for this. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to be there. He's only there because you're paying him a shed load of money to be there. Move Brock on, because it's a myth that he's a draw. It's a myth that there's more eyeballs on the product. There's eyeballs on the product when someone is saying something. Like, Becky Lynch wouldn't be over if she didn't talk as much as she did. So by that logic, how can Brock, who says nothing, be your star in the men's division? It's like, if they would learn anything from Lynch, it's that visibility, interest in character, interesting story work. That's how you make stars, not by being 10 pounds of poo in a 5-pound bag.
You mentioned Finn Balor. He's got an Intercontinental title match coming up later on against Bobby Lashley. I'll admit, I think this program is below Finn Balor. I think he could be further up the card than this. But look, you're going to see the Demon Paint for the first time at WrestleMania. For me, Balor had one of the best matches last year, that triple threat for the Intercontinental, which kicked things off. I'd imagine tonight goes pretty quickly. He goes over Bobby Lashley in a pretty quick match, I would think.
You would hope so. That would be the hope. I wouldn't have been the biggest fan of Bobby Lashley. Then I saw him the other morning, and he was really polite. So I've changed my opinion. I'm really easy to win over. And a funny story, I was obviously down doing interviews. We've interviews to come today with The Bar, The Revival, and Roman Reigns. One-on-one interviews to come, so keep an eye out for that. But I forgot my tripod. The media event started at 7:30 in Times Square, so I'm up at 6 a.m. to get there. Forgot my tripod. I'm kind of freaking out. My brother's over here with me. I text him. He's obviously had a lie-in because he doesn't need to be down at the media event at 7:30. Could you bring my tripod down? I'd really appreciate it. He brings the tripod down, sneaks his way into the event. Yeah, I've got a tripod. Let me in. I'm definitely here for the wrestling. Gets in anyway. Sees all the wrestlers. It's really bizarre. And we go for breakfast then after the first dose of interviews. And he takes the last of the bacon from the buffet because it's almost pretty gone anyway. And then Bobby Lashley comes up behind and is like, "Oh man, did you take all the bacon?" Ben was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry about that." So there's these kind of like, these pre-wrapped McDonald's-esque breakfast sandwiches, like the breakfast muffin things.
Yeah, like a McMuffin, yeah.
Yeah, Bobby Lashley takes one of them and then puts 3 in his pocket and then winks and says, "I'll get hungry later."
Interviews are hungry work if you're a guy like Bobby Lashley. That's a lot of muscle to maintain.
So now I've decided that Bobby Lashley is actually a really sound bloke, and that one anecdote should put him over in my mind. He's not beating Balor. Hopefully it's quick and painless because as much as I like seeing Balor, I don't think I'd like to see 20 minutes of him with Bobby Lashley.
And the fact there's 12 other matches on the card. You got to speak to The Bar, Sheamus and Cesaro, a tag team a few years ago who were just put together, but for me, one of the best tag teams in recent times. They're in what WWE love, a multiple-man tag team match in the SmackDown tag team title. But this is one for Sheamus. There's another WrestleMania being clocked up for the Dubliner tonight as well.
Yeah, I mean, Sheamus' achievements, again, probably don't get enough recognition in the business. Never mind outside the business. You get zero outside the business. Becky Lynch is the biggest star on the planet and barely gets any outside the business. But Sheamus doesn't get enough in the business. His longevity has been immense. The fact that he got to the top and he main evented for so many months and years, and he was a champion, and he did something that no Irishman had done since Dan O'Mahony. He became the world heavyweight champion. So Sheamus' career has been immense. He's reinvented himself as a tag wrestler, and with Cesaro, they are just brilliant. They're so much fun. In the ring, they work well. There are very few people that go and successfully transition from single to tag. Like, very few transition from tag to single. That's probably the harder thing to do. But going from a single guy into a tag program and still staying relevant, it's very difficult to do. And they've done that. And they've done it by being great in the ring, by being hardworking every night, and by getting this gimmick over. I don't even know what the gimmick is. It's like, it's just a catchphrase.
They're the Bar.
It. Yeah, it's great.
That's the gimmick.
And I was joking with him in the interview. I'm like, "Sheamus, you obviously went to an Irish language school. Like, the bar, did that come from harbar, the Irish word for brilliant?" And he was like, "No, but restart the interview and I can pretend it did." Yeah. So we don't just set the bar, we are harbar.
Nice. Right.
Go for your Gaelgores.
That's one for him tonight. I mean, look, those guys have been in a great division. The other tag team match, you got to talk to the Revival at a media event this weekend as well. They've got a match coming up for the Raw titles. They go a different way. That's going to be a singles match. Zack Ryder in this on a week where he got engaged as well, Darren.
Yeah, and it's really funny because Scott Dash Wilder said during the interview that it'll be the only positive thing that happens to Zack Ryder this week would be getting engaged. He's going to have an awful week, and cut a bit of a promo by saying, "I wouldn't bring your fiance to Mania unless you want her to see you cry." And it was this old school, like, having a bit of a go. It was really fun. They were great guys to talk to, and surprisingly open and honest about stuff. Like, we got chatting about the tag division, and they were saying basically they want to dump the belts. They think the belts are stained. They don't like the physical belts. And when I initially called them belts, I got a a quick retort to say, we're not allowed to call them belts. Belts hold up your britches. These are championship titles, according to Vince.
Yeah.
So they kind of pulled back the curtain on the way that the wrestlers are meant to refer to their hardware. But they're desperate to change to the original titles of the 80s and 90s, the ones held by the Hart Foundation, the one held by the Midnight Express. They were held by literally every team worth their salt. The British Bulldogs, you name them, they had them. Edge, Christian even had versions of them. The Hardys had them, the Dudleys had them. Every major tag team of the last 20 or 30 years held that old iconic tag title, and they're the ones that they want to bring back. They had some interesting comments about how the tag division's been booked. They said it's been ignored, it's been held back. They said winning a 10-year-old winning the tag title last year devalued the tag division, which, fans can say that, but I'm not sure if you can say that if you work for WWE, because it's true. And I'm not sure that is the angle the WWE want to go with. They want everyone to be singing on the same hymn sheet. So the Revival saying that the WWE has hurt the tag division with the bad booking and by giving the 10-year-old the titles and making a joke out of it is a really, really interesting place to go down. And it's definitely something I didn't think I would hear in that interview. So they talked about how they want to make tag wrestling great again. They don't want it to be a filler match. They don't want it to be a placeholder on a card. They think that they can put tag matches on that are so good it can be main event worthy. They think that they can be the big draw. They can get people to part with their money to come see the Revival. And you know what? Listening to them, Will, I genuinely think that they can do that. They are so good in the ring.
They're brilliant. They're an old school tag team.
Great storytellers. And someone else brought up in an interview, it's like, you guys are a throwback to the old Southern era of wrestling. And he said, no, I'm going to correct you. It's not the Southern era of tag wrestling. It's the greatest era of tag wrestling. And that's what we are a throwback to, and that's what we want to be. So I think there's a lot of, probably not as much hype around the Revival as there should be, but I'm definitely going to buy into their cult because I like what they do. I like how they carry themselves. I like how they talk. And I really think that they can. It's going to be hard to bring tags to what it was when we watched in the Attitude Era, when we were watching TLCs, when we were watching guys put their bodies on the line literally every night. I don't think that style is sustainable. But what they do is they want to work 25, 30-minute matches every night where the storytelling is first and foremost immense, and they don't have to do any big stunts to get themselves over. And I think it's refreshing, and I definitely think they could do it. I would imagine if I was a betting man, the Revival have to walk out of here with the tag titles.
Yeah, I think so.
Like,
I think
they have to be winning it. Otherwise, their plans for tag division domination are kind of dead in the water.
And interesting, the talk was that AEW were very interested in signing the Revival as well. And the Usos apparently were interested in AEW. And then the Usos and the Revival, I think in about a 2-week period, were both given the belts.
Hey, Will, everyone's interested in AEW. Even I'm talking to AEW at the moment. I mean, that's how it's worked out over the last few weeks since my departure. I'm talking to anyone. I'm a free agent, so let's see how we get on.
Hey, AEW. If they give Chris Jericho $10 million over a guaranteed contract, you got to be looking for a lot, Darren.
I'll take 10 grand. Like, come on, sign me up. I'll do whatever you want. I'll be the towel boy. I'll be the ring boy. I'll put on the turnbuckles. You name it, I'll do it. AEW is great I think it's great for the industry because it will make WWE reevaluate what they're doing. It can be bad in some ways if guys are stupid enough to sign up for the guaranteed money and not for the place on the card. Like, you might make a bit less money, but probably have a much bigger profile. I think there's a bit of a golden era of wrestling on at the moment as a fan because there is so much outside of WWE that is better. There was a time where WWE was the only show in town because it was the best wrestling, it was the best storytelling, it was the best production. I think that time has passed. I think it's still the best production, but it's not the best wrestling and the best storytelling anymore. There are a lot of other options out there that are better. Cheeky name drop. I had a chat with Dave Meltzer the other night.
Big Dave, friend of the show.
Friend of the show. I don't know how you describe Dave. He's probably the personification of wrestling journalism. He kind of invented it. He was the first person to cover wrestling in the early 80s?
Yeah, man, he was pretty much. Obviously, everyone talks about his match system and the fact that he gives 5-star matches now up to 7-star matches. But that maybe makes Dave a little bit too simple because to me, Meltzer's always been the guy who kept good track of people who are going to wrestling events. He keeps tremendous notes in terms of attendances, and also he's a really good journalist at actually knowing the buzz of what's happening in the industry. It's very clear over his 30+ years of being a wrestling journalist, this guy has sources everywhere.
Yeah, and he's not a fanboy with a laptop. Like, a lot of the stuff I learned from the media events this week is it's fans just going there to put themselves over as opposed to actually ask any questions. There was one question about the whole John Oliver skit, like in all of the interviews yesterday. Only one. Everything else was tell me about your Mania opponent. And I probably fell into the trap of not deciding to torpedo an interview by going down a road that would have just destroyed it, which would have been the John Oliver. So I get it can be a bit awkward, but in fairness to Meltzer, he's always held the WWE and Vince to account, which is why Vince cannot stand him. Vince does not like him. He has no time for him because I think he still holds a grudge about the steroid stuff. Meltzer was a very, very vocally outspoken on that. He's been vocal about premature deaths for wrestlers, the wrestlers dying. He's been vocal about concussion and CTE. He is a guy who, as a journalist, has upheld journalism standards and principles by holding people to holding them to account. He's very much lived this old adage of comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, and he's been great at it. And I had a chat with Meltzer. He was ringside at WrestleCon, and I've, friend of the show. I've exchanged one or two emails with him. He's interested in OTT wrestling, so I've given him some match cards and some results cards and some quick footnotes and cliff notes on what's kind of been happening in OTT. So I just went up and introduced myself, and really, really good guy. But he was talking about how some of the most interesting stuff is happening outside of WWE. He was talking about OTT, and I know, Will, you've yet to get on the bandwagon, you've yet to experience it, but he's getting to Dublin.
I promise I will go. I'll maybe go with Dave.
You and Meltzer are coming to Dublin this year to see it because he's really interested to get over. And he talks about the video packages. The video packages have been a game changer for OTT, the way that they've approached them and the way that they've used them to tell stories. Like, don't be surprised to see WWE rip off OTT and put Walter now, the new UK champion, in a program with Devlin, because the success of it in a different region globally has been massive. So don't be surprised to see them rob it. So yeah, Meltzer is really, really banging on the drum of some of the best stuff in the business is happening outside of the WWE at the moment, and that's why I think AEW will be good as a fan. Maybe not. It won't be good for Vince because it means that wrestlers will artificially have their prices inflated because there'll be a bidding war. Well, usually it could be I'll pay what you want, or you go and work in some bingo hall in Hoboken. Now here's a genuine threat and a genuine other option for you to consider.
Two other matches I want to ask you about for the main card at WrestleMania coming up tonight. First of all, Kofi Kingston going up against Daniel Bryan. There's still a little bit of doubt whether that match is actually going to happen because of some of the shenanigans that's been happening, trying to stop Kofi Kingston from getting there. But Kofi Kingston has built up some genuine heat going into this, fans getting right behind him and the New Day, and the fact that they want him to beat Daniel Bryan tonight. In many ways, this has kind of been the sleeper hit match. People were expecting all the attention to be on the Raw title match, but a lot of people are interested in this SmackDown match.
I'm definitely more interested in this than the Raw match, I'll be honest. It's the match I want to see. I've liked the new incarnation of Daniel Bryan. I don't think it's his best work. I don't think Daniel Bryan works best as a heel, to be honest. I think he is, with the interaction that he has with the crowd, with the level of buy-in he has with the crowd, I always think he works better when the crowd are behind him. He's obviously going to be the guy no one's rooting for in this match. It'll be good because both of them can work, and Kofi is an immense talent in the ring. It just feels a little bit rushed and out of nowhere. The criticism you'll have maybe the main event is they've dragged it out a bit. They've just kind of shoehorned this in. It feels a little bit like it's inserted into it. Like, Daniel Bryan barely feels like a main eventer, and Kofi Kingston doesn't. I don't think he's a big enough name to be the world champion. So for me, he might have all the talent to be there. I don't think he has the name recognition. I don't think he has the stage presence to be the world champion. And I think if Daniel Bryan doesn't retain, I'd be very surprised. I think it'd be strange to give Kofi the belt. I think you'd put him on a highway to nowhere because I think automatically he's not going to deliver what you want with him being at the top of the card.
Something that feels weird, weird as well, is two future Hall of Famers in Randy Orton and AJ Styles. Just leaves me shrugging about the idea of those two guys going up against each other.
I don't know. I disagree. I think Styles does his best work when people are not expecting anything from him. I think last year the Nakamura stuff was so anticlimactic. It just didn't give anyone what they wanted. So to give him a chance where he's going in with no pressure and just a chance to have a good match. And Randy Orton can have good matches. We saw that Hell in a Cell with Jeff Hardy. It was a different kind of good match, but I thought it was a really good match. I think Orton is definitely, like you say, a future Hall of Famer. and has a decent track record of pulling out the best of guys on his level. I get that there hasn't really been a build or a story around it that is worth buying into, but as a pure wrestling match, I think it can deliver.
Miz and Shane McMahon then is the other big story match coming up for tonight. This has been kind of played out over the last few months, going back to when Shane was crowned the best wrestler in the world, and since then,
yeah, I love that. That's great, isn't it? Shane's the best wrestler.
Yeah, look, I think it's a fun angle going into this. Himself and Miz have teamed up together. Shane McMahon then turns on Miz because it's Miz who has cost him some of these big matches against the Usos. Shane turns heel, beats up the Miz in front of his dad, and now they have this grudge match coming in. You can't really have a WrestleMania without a storyline match with a McMahon involved.
Yeah, it's a decent program. It's kind of fun. Like, I like Shane McMahon. Selfishly, as a fan, I'm delighted I get to see Shane McMahon. I wish it would be in a match where he'd have to jump off something.
Yeah, that
would be for me ultimately what I'd be looking for. Probably selfishly, I don't really want Shane McMahon to jump off something and hurt himself. That was actually a bit of a joke. But I am actually excited to see him. I do want to see Shane McMahon. I think he can put on a good match. Like, his match against Styles a couple of years ago, the opener of WrestleMania, was probably the best wrestling match on that card. Definitely top 3. So I think it'll be a decent match. Again, there's just a sea of average wrestling matches around them. Like, it's almost like overkill. There's like 2 pay-per-views happening at once, and it seems like they've just done their best to keep everyone happy, maybe by making sure everyone has a WrestleMania match, to the point where every tag team on SmackDown is involved in the SmackDown match, and nearly every wrestler of meaning or note has a match at WrestleMania, just so you can say you're on the date. I think they're working maybe too hard to keep everyone happy, with AEW lurking in the background and trying to find some disenfranchised wrestlers to sign up, some guys maybe who haven't been drinking the WWE Kool-Aid for a while. So it feels definitely overpopulated, and I think the Miz and Shane McMahon's match will suffer from the fact that there's just too much going on around it.
I do wonder as well, where once upon a time you got your pay-per-view paycheck if you were on the main card. You were entitled to DVD sales as well. Nowadays everything goes through the network. I would imagine it's a little bit cheaper to book absolutely everyone on the card than it would have been a few years ago.
Definitely, 100%. I would say the pay-per-view bonuses only apply to ones that actually run on pay-per-view now. So I'd say it is a little bit easier to have those inflated cards. I'd nearly be tempted to come after the kickoff show so that I can be as excited as I want to be for the main event. Like, Friday was a really long day here because obviously I was up at 6:30 a.m. Oh, woe is me, tough life. But then you're going till 11, half 11, 12 at night. And by the main event, third fall, you want to be invested because it's brilliant. Gargano and Adam Cole was such a great wrestling match and so much fun. And you want to give it everything you have. But you're just literally tired, and you're running out of energy, and you're running out of steam, and you can't jump and whoop and holler in the way that you would have 2 or 3 hours before that. So that's my big fear for the main event, is that this card just has not too much going on, but just like too much on it. There's too much there. Not too much that your excitement would be drained because you're giving it to other matches. There's just literally too much there.
Yeah, and TakeOver, you mentioned it there, main event, Gargano going up against Adam Cole, Bebe and all that. Unfortunately, we didn't get the payoff for a 4-year feud. They'd worked on this so hard that it was going to be Ciampa against Gargano, former teammates, 2 guys who become friends in the industry and then got their tag team. They broke up multiple times, double-crossed each other at different times. That was meant to be the blow-off, but unfortunately Ciampa's injuries, that didn't happen. How was Adam Cole as a replacement in the main event at TakeOver on Friday night?
He was great. It was a really, really good match. And about halfway through, I probably moaned about it a bit by saying, you know what, this isn't great. But the first 2 falls were inconsequential. I don't think they don't matter to you because, unless the second fall is the same guy that got the first fall, that's the only reason a 2 or 3 falls match makes sense. Or if it's a gimmick match, or if it's like a Hell in a Cell, a 3 stages of hell, that's when you can get excited about it. But for the most part, first 2 falls were boring. Third fall, everything on the line. So many false finishes. You have to run in from the Undisputed Era where you're like, that's it. Gargano's finished. And he fights them off. There's some sick bumps and some crazy things that happen in that match. It was brilliant. It was wonderful storytelling. It was a great payoff where I think even though I kind of wanted Adam Cole to win, I was glad when Gargano won. I think Undisputed Era is probably the most exciting faction in wrestling at the moment. I would find them more interesting than the Bullet Club and the AEW Elite Boys. Yeah, I like them more. I think there's just a little bit more substance there to it. I don't think they try too hard to be comedy. I think they take themselves seriously, and it's nice to see that in an era of Joey Ryan dick flips and being the Elite sing-songs, that we can still have some serious wrestling factions.
Does that mean Gargano stays in NXT then? Because I think it was 14 months was the diagnosis roughly for Ciampa. Given he's an elite athlete, I guess he comes back maybe a few months shorter than that. Do they keep Gargano there for another 8-9 months till he's back?
Part of me was kind of hoping, and it would have been really unfulfilling for everyone else in the stadium if it happened at the Barclays Centre, but part of me was hoping that he could lose both falls cleanly and not even go to a third fall, and then just have a huge crisis of confidence. And where does Johnny Gargano go from now? And try and rebuild the character after, like, Adam Cole painted a convincing picture of, you're Johnny Loser. You lose wrestling matches. That's what you are. I kind of would have liked to see Cole bury him, beat him cleanly in both falls, and then have Gargano down and out, dead and buried, and have to fight and claw his way back up. I think a guy like Gargano is always better to be chasing than to be carrying, because you buy into him more when he's chasing. It matters more when he's fighting for his life than when he's just defending. So I think for me that would have been more interesting happening, but at the same time I'd like to see where they go with him, because I'm not really sure, can he do a 2 or 3 month program with Adam Cole now? I'm not really sure if it would keep my attention. Probably would keep a lot of other people's attention, but I would have preferred to see Johnny Gargano chasing, because I think that's where he does his best work.
Just on the final, I want to ask you about Roman Reigns, because he's headlined the last 4 WrestleManias. WWE have done everything possible to try and make this guy popular. I think he's definitely got a bump on the back of the unfortunate circumstance of his illness returning, him having to go away for a few months and now come back. What was he like? Because you spoke to him the other day. How is he feeling about maybe the acceptance that he's going to be on the middle of the card for this WrestleMania, which is going to be so different to what the last 4 or 5 years have been for him?
He's going to be on the middle of the card in one of those matches that the Revival called placeholder matches. It's just there to keep you in your seat. It feels a bit like they've shoehorned Roman in to get him on the card by just putting him in that match. But at the same time, I'm glad they did. I was absolutely gutted. I wouldn't have been a Reigns fan. I would have been one of these idiots that boo Reigns when he comes out just to be cool, because they were trying too hard to get him over.
You filthy smirk.
Yeah, but I appreciate him, and I appreciate what he's done. And, you know, when a lot of guys do phone it in, he's on the road 260 days a year. It's hard to carry a company on your back, especially when the fans don't buy it, and the company, you hope that they won't listen to the fans and take that spot off you. So I feel for him professionally. I think he's had a rough run, because while he has been the top of the food chain, people will remember the fact that fans didn't really buy him there or didn't want him there. So it's kind of like a rejected champion. For a while, he verged on nearly having go-away heat, which is reserved for X-Pac and Baron Corbin.
Which the worst part is, Darren, they could have used this. Remember when he beat The Undertaker and he came out and he just didn't speak for about 6 or 7 minutes, and then he just said he was getting booed out of the building, and he just goes, "This is my yard now." That was the moment for Roman Reigns just to become the ass-kicking heel that he could have been.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. But instead they decided, no, we want Roman to be stand up and fight and all this other garbage that I don't even think it gets over with children nowadays. I think it's just pointless. It's great to see him back at the card. Like, wrestling fans are the worst bunch of people in the world sometimes. There are actually some crackpots out there that questioned whether or not this crazy conspiracy that a cancer diagnosis was used to get him over. It was like, I've heard some crazy stuff from wrestling fans over the years, like the Kevin Sullivan conspiracy theory, but this is worse than that, because it's so stupidly outlandish. Why would you even say it? You know it's not true. You know it's absolutely bonkers. It's up there with moon landing conspiracy theories for me. So I'm glad to see him back on the card. He was great with his time, because he doesn't have to be, because it was very much rushed. We got one-on-ones with the Bar. We got one-on-ones with the Revival. Roman was a group thing because he was just passing through, and he still was good with his time and decent and answered the questions and did all of the groups, even when he was told, "You're done, you can go now." And he's like, I haven't got these guys. So he was decent with his time. He was friendly with his answers. He really put the women over, because naturally I'm here to ask everyone I meet about Becky Lynch. So that's what I did. And he was talking about how, yeah, look, he always likes to be on the top of the card. that's always his plan, to be on the top of the card. But he was happy that for a change he wasn't on the top of the card, because it was guys who deserved to be on the top of the card, and he was really pleased with them. So I'm excited to see him, but not excited to see his match, if that makes any sense.